Okay, welcome back everybody to Beyond the Code. I'm Edmund Phelan, your host. I'm here with Patrick Murphy, who's going to be talking about GDPR today. So Patrick, what is GDPR?
Well, Edmund, thanks for having me. GDPR stands for the General Data Protection Regulation. It's a law that was enacted in the EU in about 2019. And it covers any data subjects, so basically people in the EU.
Yeah.
It's called a long-arm jurisdiction law, which is an interesting part of law, which means even if you're a company in China, if you're in any way dealing with the information of any EU user, you have to comply under the very stringent regulations of the GDPR.
Okay, so it's protecting its citizens.
Yeah, it's citizens and anyone in the EU.
Yeah, okay. And so how does this apply to software engineering?
Well, it means that when you're going about designing software and your products, if you intend on processing data within the EU, whether that means your data centers are in the EU, or whether it means any one of your users might be in the EU, you need to take very stringent measures to ensure you can comply with the laws set out in the GDPR.
Okay.
And if you in any way make a mistake when you're doing that kind of stuff, like the fines go to like 9, 10, 11 figures if you're not careful.
Is there jail time involved as well, or just fines?
Mostly fines. I don't think there has been like if you're incredibly negligent, then maybe they jail you, but I don't think anyone has been jailed for GDPR reasons.
I see. So what are some case studies where things have gone wrong for developers in GDPR?
It's quite a new law. I think it came into effect kind of mid 2018. So it's had a good few years now to kind of settle in. And we've seen some quite large fines imposed so far. I think the biggest one has been imposed on Meta, not even for like a data breach or anything, but just for sharing EU data to the US when they weren't supposed to be.
Okay.
So that's kind of like the biggest fine that there has been. Pretty much if you go down the list of the biggest tech companies, they've all been impacted in some way by some clause of the GDPR.
Yeah, and was the data that they were sending private data, or was it just like user data they were just putting on both servers?
Just regular user data. Because that user data was being sent over to the US and may have been available for the US to then surveil EU users. GDPR was really not happy about that.
Wow. So I didn't realize it was that stringent.
Yeah, it's incredible. And it's like there are many people that might argue that because of how stringent it is anti-business. Because it means if you're a website, say you're in a news website, what you want to do is you want to create high quality content that brings users to your website. And anything that disrupts the user experience in that sense will detract from your business and your ability to do your work. So if the second I go to your website, I get this big full screen pop-up saying, can we access your cookies? And there's like 14 different fields that you need to click through to get through your website. That really bothers some users. So in some sense, it can detract from the user experience. But obviously, we don't want all websites to be tracking everything they can about us. GDPR has the very stringent rule that if anything you track, they must have a reason to track it. If I consent to you storing my data for the purposes of, say, providing me customer support, you can't then 3 months later go, that's actually a really great data set for our AI customer support bot. We're going to use that. It's not allowed.
I see.
As well as that, the EU is working on updating GDPR. So instead of just protecting data, it protects data and you can't make the user experience terrible. Because there are some websites that know this information is very valuable to them. And so they'll give you your pop-up, but the only way of turning down the tracking is if you manually click on 100 different buttons to reject the tracking for that specific user. I'm sure you've seen them, and I'm sure everyone at home has seen them. So under the new proposed legislation, rejecting it has to be as easy as accepting it. Because like you don't want 100 buttons and then the reject button's hidden in some sub-menu. As well as that, there have been companies, namely I think the biggest example has been Meta, where either you allow us to track your data or you pay us money. Same has been for the Daily Mail. If you want to look at their material on their website, you have to agree to be tracked, and you have to agree to give them access to your data, or you pay them some money.
Pay the subscription, yeah.
That has been under review by the EU, and it seems to be that the consensus is that's not consent, that is coercion. You're forcing them to pay you or be tracked. And it's kind of uncomfortable because it means if you can't afford to pay, you have to be surveilled.
And if you don't want to be surveilled, you can't use the service, essentially.
And when that applies to services like the Daily Mail, okay, don't read the paper.
Yeah.
But when that applies to like Instagram,
Yeah.
or when that applies to Facebook,
Yeah.
that's much harder to just go, well, I'm not going to use this software.
Yeah.
And I think at home, it's an interesting question of, would you be willing to pay €12 a month to make sure none of your data is tracked? It might be a good idea to review the apps you're using. There's quite often a setting that you can toggle that will at least reduce the amount of data tracking you do. And some companies will do this ethically. Like on ChatGPT, you can turn off data tracking. So they won't use your information to train their models. And that's fine. And that doesn't impact anything else. Whereas if you want to use Google's AI models, which they have a very generous rate limit and they're free, if you don't consent to getting your data tracked, it means that you can't access the history of your own chats. So if you're talking about something with the Google AI, and you're having this long conversation that's super helpful to you, if you close that tab, it's gone forever. You can't access it. And that is a clear ploy to try and force you to enable data tracking technologies.
Yeah.
It's similar in that a lot of services have like rewinds. I'm sure you know, like Spotify Rewind, Apple Music Rewind, Discord had a rewind. All these services have rewinds. And I think they serve kind of two main purposes. Number one is you will show it to your friends, some of which might not have the app and which might download the app because it looks cool. So you get this kind of social media sharing and organic marketing, where everyone's like, oh, I'm a top 0.001% listener of this artist. Or I'm a top 0.001% of this software. And that can be kind of like clout in some circles. And the second, perhaps more pernicious reason is you can't access these rewinds if you don't consent to them tracking. For example, on YouTube and users of YouTube Music, if you don't allow YouTube to store your entire history of all the videos you've watched, how much you've watched them, how you've interacted with them, and use that data to train an algorithm to serve you videos, you're ineligible to receive a rewind of the history that you've seen. And some might say, well, to be fair, if you're not letting them track it,
I was just going to say, if they're not
how do you expect them to show it to you?
And like there is some services, like you were saying, YouTube, that will make your experience a lot better if you let them track your data. Like YouTube without the algorithm is just random. You know.
And I mean, you can look at it in that your YouTube experience is worse, but you can also look at it as if YouTube is better at serving you content, that's not in favor of you and making your life better. That's in favor of you spending more time on their platform, where they can serve you more ads, and where they can generate more revenue off you.
I see.
As an example of that, TikTok is the aftercursor of Vine. And what Vine failed to get right, even though it's pretty much identical to TikTok, is the algorithm. What TikTok have managed to figure out is the science behind figuring out exactly what you like and being able to learn from it and serve you the perfect content. And obviously then they can serve ads on top of that have a really high conversion rate and people really like clicking on. But TikTok made a misstep in that the data they were collecting, while they were storing it in the EU, was available to their engineers in China. And the EU investigated a tip-off that this was the case. And they saw like, all this private data about EU users and their likes and their dislikes. If you ask TikTok for the data they have on you, you'll be really surprised at all the stuff they figured out on you just based off what 6-second videos you've been watching. And so after seeing that all this data, super sensitive about these EU users, was available to these engineers in China that were like unvetted and not approved by the EU. They levied a €530 million fine against ByteDance, the parent company of TikTok, and basically said, look, we don't believe you when you say all this data is private in the EU. We can see it's available to engineers in China. So we're levying this fine against you, and you better fix that. And it hasn't just been that these huge tech giants are the only ones getting kind of thrown under the bus for mishandling GDPR and user data. And it hasn't only been companies only operating in the EU.
Yeah.
There's been a case of a company called Clearview AI, which is a facial recognition company based entirely in the US.
Okay.
And what they did was they scraped all these public repositories of like people's information. So like Instagram, their Facebooks, their Twitters, their Venmos, their LinkedIn.
Yeah.
To kind of create this database where you could match a face to a person.
Yeah.
And they provided this as a service solely to law enforcement.
Yeah, I don't really see anything wrong with that, though, in my mind, because that's public data. Like you yourself are saying my Instagram page is public to the entire world to view.
But the issue was, under GDPR, the data is the subjects of the data. The data belongs to EU people. And so it falls under GDPR.
Okay.
And so because this data was taken like without these users' consent for this other purpose, the company was fined, I think, like over 30 million.
Okay.
And in this specific case, the Dutch data regulator was so unhappy with this company, they threatened to go after the individual executive's personal assets.
Oh my God.
Of an American executive.
Yeah.
Even though like
how would they even have jurisdiction as well?
Because GDPR gives these data protection agencies like pretty much unlimited jurisdiction as long as EU user data is at risk.
Oh, wow. Okay. That's so interesting. So my question is, for new software engineers listening to this podcast and listening to what you've talked about today, how can we avoid all of these pitfalls for GDPR?
I would say as a fledgling startup, if you're starting a new company, you should keep the basic principles in mind as you're designing stuff. You don't want user data to be publicly accessible. It should be fairly easy for you to go and find a specific user's data if they want it deleted or changed. But you don't have to put in a gargantuan amount of effort to make this stuff perfect. Because as a new business, your priority is my idea any good? Does anyone want it? Can I make a good service that improves the world?
Yeah.
As you grow and as you succeed, then that's the kind of time where you should find someone that really gets GDPR and can construct systems that comply with it.
Yeah.
So that you've got a small, maybe one person, maybe a small group of people really know their stuff about GDPR and can write the software that kind of touches user data and make that accessible to the rest of the company.
Yeah.
If you're joining a larger company, they will have that group established.
Yeah.
And it should be very simple for you as you're building the systems to know that you're complying with GDPR.
Yeah.
Because people really knowledgeable about the topic will have already done the hard work of how are we going to segment this stuff out.
I see.
And it'll just be up to you to kind of implement the stuff as they have designed it.
Okay. Yeah, so it's basically just having it pre-built into those tools that when you're interacting with data.
And as a software engineer, you should just keep in mind, be sensible with user data. Don't make it public. Don't leak it. Don't do stuff that the user hasn't agreed with it. And be ethical.
Yeah. And store what you need to store.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. I think that's us. Thanks very much for listening. And thank you, Patrick, for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
Perfect. Thank you. Welcome, everybody, to the quiz section of the podcast. I'm going to ask you some questions about what me and Patrick talked about, and you write down your answers. Okay. First question. From the case studies we talked about, who had the biggest fine? The answer to that is Meta. If the data is public, can you do whatever you want with it? True or false? False. You cannot use user data in a way the user has not consented to. I want to thank everybody for listening to this podcast series. Any additional information about the case studies or anything we talked about will be in the description.